What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stucky.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Flex podcast from the Action Network. I'm your host, Chris Raybon from Action Network and Fantasy Labs, and this is our Wide Receiver 1 episode. Here to break it down with me, I'm joined by one of the most accurate fantasy rankers and projectors in the game, the odds maker, Sean Kerner. Sean, what's going on?
What's up? I'm pumped. This week, we actually have live football. Yes, I know it's the Hall of Fame game. But as we talked about on our other pod, I'm a preseason degen. I'm one of the biggest preseason degens. So I'm just excited to start seeing some of these guys that we've been watching in training camp and stuff step on the field and, make some plays on it and, start to overreact to things. So I'm pumped for preseason starting this week. How about you?
Oh, yeah. We finally get to see some movement in our projections. I feel like you get to this point and there's like a dead period, and you don't really get to change much, and then injuries start pouring in, and you get starting to hear more buzz and stuff. So definitely excited. Won't affect these top 12 wide receivers too much, but we'll have a couple more wide receiver episodes after this where we'll really dive into some of the guys you can find further down the board. But I want to start it off by just talking through the wide receiver 1 tier and see where you're at and kind of help people navigate that. So it started off with CeeDee Lamb going into his age 25 season. He's improved every year, 74, 935, and 5 as a rookie, 79, 1102, and 6 in year 2, 107, 13, 59, and 9 a couple years ago. And then last year, 135 catches, 1,749 yards, 12 touchdowns. So the first thing, can CeeDee Lamb keep improving? Because, if he does again, he'll have like 150 catches for 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns.
Yeah, maybe he's closer to his ceiling now. But, this is kind of the career arc we expected. When the Cowboys took him in 2020, they already had 2, I would say at the time, really good wide receivers in Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Cooper's obviously still very good, and Michael Gallup's retired. But CeeDee Lamb took him a few years to really break out because he had to move up the target pecking order. But right now, he is, arguably the best receiver in the league in real life and in fantasy. Finished overall wide receiver 1 last year. But Tyreek Hill did barely edge him out in terms of points per game. But I think Lamb should be the first receiver off the board, the second player off the board once Christian McCaffrey's taken in most formats. Like you mentioned, Lamb's only entering his age 25 season, so he's really, entering his prime right now. We might not have even seen his best season yet, so maybe there is room to grow. Whereas, Tyreek is entering his age 30 season, so, while he's shown zero signs of slowing down, certainly over the next season or two, we could see that. So I think Lamb right now is the top wide receiver in fantasy.
Yeah, and I have no bones to pick with that. We've talked about it. Dak might have to rely on the passing game more this year, just with the state of the running game with no Pollard and some shifts on the offensive line, bringing in some newer guys. I think CeeDee Lamb is set up to dominate again. Love the age. And Tyreek, number 2. You mentioned age 30 season. He has caught 110 balls or more each of the last 3 years. His 2 seasons with Miami, 119, 710, and 7. And then last year, 119, 17, 99, and 13. So he had 110 plus catches and 1,700 plus yards with the Dolphins each of these past 2 years and managed to stay healthy. I guess that's the only thing. Like, how much, if any, decline age related are you expecting from Tyreek?
Yeah, not really. Again, he had really zero signs of slowing down last year. He does rely on speed, so maybe now that he's in his 30s, that's going to start to go away a bit, or maybe just unable to stay healthy as much in his 30s. But I think he's right there. I'm not really splitting hairs with this. If you take Tyreek Hill as the top receiver, I wouldn't fault you. I think it's really between Lamb or Hill to be the second pick off the board. But I will ask you a weird question, but like Tua and Dak, they played every game last year, right? So, both of these receivers, they're going to be elite even with backups in, but who would you rank higher if either quarterback were out? Would you rank Tyreek higher with Mike White, I guess, would be the quarterback, or CeeDee Lamb with either Trey Lance or Cooper Rush? Like, which receiver do you think would still be higher if the backup were in?
Oof, I'd probably go with Tyreek and Mike White just because. I mean, I think it would have to be Cooper Rush. I don't think Trey Lance is on the same level as a quarterback. That is. But yeah, I would still go Tyreek because I just think that he hit the speed and there's just more options for what you could do even with a backup quarterback to get the ball in his hands. And I know you could do that with CeeDee too, but yeah, I think the speed and it just kind of does. And I trust that McDaniel offense a little more than McCarthy, or a lot more than McCarthy, even though McCarthy did some good things last year, I will say. What about you? Would you be Tyreek for you or Lamb?
Yeah, I would agree. I think Tyreek, I think you got to think about that. Like, both of these players' floor is out of their control. It's, injuries or their quarterback gets hurt. So I just try to think of all different scenarios. And I think, Tyreek would probably have, more upside if both of these quarterbacks were to miss some time. So that's a point for Tyreek. But overall, you can't really plan on that as your decision.
No.
As your decision. But I think upside with everyone healthy, I'm going Lamb. But that's just one other angle I think of when it's close like this. But I'm still giving the edge to Lamb overall.
Yeah, I don't think it's a situation like McCaffrey where he's in a tier of his own. I think if you're playing it, like let's say you're in 150 best ball leagues and you have a ton of that number 2 spot. I think switching it up between Lamb and Hill makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Jamar Chase is the number 3 wide receiver. He's going to only be 24 this year. And all 3 of his NFL seasons have ended with at least 80 catches, at least 1,000 yards, at least 7 touchdowns. That Bengals team has the last place schedule now because Burrow gets hurt. You lose Tyler Boyd. You lose some, I guess, Irv Smith, that's not really big. You also lose Mixon. So, I mean, Jamar Chase could be even a bigger target hog, I guess, this year if some of those, complementary wide receivers, don't pan out. What is your outlook for Jamar Chase headed into year 4?
Yeah, it's very good. He's my wide receiver 3, so I'm in line with this. And, we were talking about hypotheticals with Lamb and Tyreek playing with a backup quarterback. They didn't have to last year. Jamar Chase did. Yeah. And, while Jake Browning did a great job, I thought, of stepping up for Joe Burrow for essentially the entire second half of the season, Chase's production did drop off with him under center. He averaged 32nd most best ball points added per game with the 6 games he played with Browning under center. He was 5th overall in that same stat in Burrow's 9 starts where he finished the game. So I think we just need to factor that in when thinking about Chase's 2023 season. So I have him way up there, with Joe Burrow back. He's a top 3 receiver. Like you said, it's not just Jamar Chase is entering his prime at 24. Joe Burrow's entering his prime at 27. Do you have any concerns, I should say, like with Burrow? Like, is he an injury risk, or have these just been fluky? Because I think when you take Chase wide receiver 3, you're kind of banking on Burrow playing at least, I would say, 14 games. But do you have any concerns at this point in his career with Burrow, just how often he's been hurt?
No, I still think it's fluky enough. And I mean, when you're comparing him to other guys, when you're comparing Chase to other guys, I mean, you kind of hit on it. Browning is still, I think, a better situation than a lot of these other guys would be in if their quarterback went down. So yeah, no real concerns about Joe Burrow yet. If he has another injury this year, then you start to wonder. But as of now, not really. All right, Justin Jefferson is the wide receiver 4. He's entering his age 25 year. And I guess the big thing with him is most of his careers has been spent with Kirk Cousins at quarterback. With Cousins compared to without, the catch rate 68% versus 65.5%. Yards per target 10.3 with Cousins, 9.7 with everybody else. Touchdowns per target 5.4% with Cousins, 3.4% with everyone else. So there has been a downtick. Now looks like Sam Darnold's going to start the year. McCarthy either is going to redshirt or probably take over at some point mid-season. How does that impact your outlook for Justin Jefferson?
Oh, yeah, it definitely impacts my projection for him. Weeks 1 through 4 last year when he and Kirk Cousins were both healthy. That was actually the only stretch last year. They were both healthy. Jefferson averaged 14.5 best ball points added per game. That would have been easily top on the season. Unfortunately, he missed a handful of games. So he played 3 games with Nick Mullins under center at the end of last year, and he ranked 12th in best ball points added per game. So you just have to, think I'd say Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy will probably be better than Nick Mullins. But it's certainly going to be a downgrade. The question is how much. I think Justin Jefferson going in that wide receiver 4 to 6 range, I think sounds about right when it comes to my projections. But I would still lean towards the guy we're going to talk about next, Amon Ra St. Brown, over JJ. I think it's just a more stable situation, not as many question marks. Whereas Jefferson still might be the best receiver in the league, but the drop in just QB talent or the reliability of the quarterback, I think does bump Jefferson down. Not a lot, but at least down to like wide receiver 5 for me.
Yeah, and the next guy is Amon Ra St. Brown, who we both love on this podcast. He's entering his age 25 season. He's improved every year from 90 catches, 912 yards, and 5 scores as a rookie to 106 for 1161 and 6 in year 2. And last year, 119 catches, 1,515 yards, and 10 scores. So, he keeps getting better. I mean, he has a CeeDee Lamb ceiling as well. So you like Amon Ra over Jefferson this year?
Yeah, I do, and he's really become one of the most reliable players in all of fantasy. He finished inside the top 30, 87% of the time last year. That ranked first, and he finished top 12, 60% of the time, which tied Tyreek Hill for the highest rate. So he just has the optimal floor ceiling combo week in, week out. And he's always seen a ton of volume, but last year was the first time he scored double-digit touchdowns. He had 10. And I just think given how often the Lions just get into the red zone, how high scoring they are, they play inside a lot this year. Like, I think that he could easily repeat, 8 to 10 touchdowns this year. And with his, just overall volume, that's just a lethal combination. So he's my wide receiver 4, and I would take him ahead of Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I still have him wide receiver 5, but I could. They're in the same tiers.
Yeah.
Barely anything, so I don't mind that at all. But that makes a lot of sense just given the question marks. Because I even think with Jefferson, going back to Jefferson, a guy like Nick Mullins is still better than probably Darnold or McCarthy, just because Nick Mullins is so YOLO and just he'll throw for like 400 yards and 2 touchdowns and 4 picks, and it just all the numbers will be there. So that probably doesn't hurt a guy like Jefferson as much as maybe more conservative. I do think you'll probably see some more heavier sets, which I guess that gives Jefferson a better chance to be targeted on a per route basis. But they might dial it back in terms of the volume, so there's some uncertainty there with that Viking offense. Whereas, as you mentioned, the Lions, we kind of know what we're getting with Amon Ra to start the year and that whole offense. AJ Brown is in number 6. Puka is 6 in some spots here, but we'll go with AJ. He's entering his age 27 season, so that should be peaking. 2 years with Philadelphia, 88 catches, 1,496 yards and 11 touchdowns a couple years ago. Last year, 106 for 1,456 and 7. So he's been about similarly productive both years. What do you think of AJ now in year 1 of this Kellen Moore offense?
Yeah, he's my wide receiver 6, so I'm in line with this. And when the Eagles' offense was humming in the first half of the season, he ranked 3rd in best ball points added per game. But once offense fell apart after that, he ranked 49th in best ball points added per game in the second half of the season. So you just have to really bank on Kellen Moore getting this offense back on track, which I think he should. So I think Brown will push top 5 value this year. I wouldn't take him over Amon Ra or Justin Jefferson, obviously, but I think he's sort of the end of this elite wide receiver 1 tier for me. So he's confidently wide receiver 6 for me. Whereas, wide receivers 7 and 8, I think you could debate who goes there, but I have AJ Brown, squarely at wide receiver 6 for me right now.
Yeah, and age 27 could be his peak year.
True.
So yeah, no real concerns for him. All right, before we get into wide receiver 7 through 12, just wanted to pause really quickly to talk about FantasyLabs.com. FantasyLabs.com is where all of our season-long fantasy football content will live this season. It's going to have all of our updated rankings. It's going to have all of our other fantasy content that we put out all off season and into the season as well. All of our start sits, all that good stuff. Once the season starts, pretty much all of the award-winning analysis and content from Sean and I can be found over at FantasyLabs.com this year. That's a change from ActionNetwork.com in previous years. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. And right now you can get $20 off FantasyLabs.com by using the promo code FLEX20 at FantasyLabs.com/flex. That's FLEX20 at FantasyLabs.com/flex for $20 off. Again, FantasyLabs.com/flex and use promo code FLEX20 to take advantage of $20 off. Now, wide receiver 7, Puka Nacua, had a great rookie campaign at age 22. However, Cooper Kupp was out for a little bit last season. In the 5 games Kupp was out, Nacua averaged 22 PPR points, 17.5 half PPR points. When Kupp was in, that dropped to just under 16 PPR points and just over 13 half PPR points. So there was a little bit of a difference in terms of the usage. 11.6 targets without Kupp, 8.3 in the 12 games they played together. So do you think, if Kupp is healthy, that Nacua still has enough for this wide receiver 7 spot?
Yeah, this is probably closer to his ceiling, if I'm being honest. And he's coming off one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen. Finished as a wide receiver 4 last year. I knew he was the real deal when he continued to produce at a high level, even when Cooper Kupp was able to make his season debut in week 5. And if you remember, that was one of my favorite projections to kind of make last year was Puka Nacua in week 5. Just how the hell is this going to work out with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua in the same offense? And it was good, but like as you pointed out, his best ball points added per game did drop off by a little over 5 points a game when Kupp was active. That still would have ranked, 13th across the entire season. So still very good, but that does feel like this is closer to his ceiling if Kupp were to stay healthy all year. But he is entering year 2. Kupp's getting older, so it could just be. I think Puka Nacua is essentially Cooper Kupp in this offense from a couple seasons ago. So I do think that the needle is pointing up for Puka, but just the time to draft him was last year. Taking him wide receiver 7 is a bit tougher pill to swallow here. But I think his production taking as big of a hit as it did when Kupp was active does give me some pause here. But my projections have him wide receiver 8 at the end of the day. So this is about right. But again, the time to draft Puka was last year.
Yeah, I don't have any major concerns with him. I mean, he had a good enough rookie year that I think he's going to be good. This offense plays indoors. The defense is, not super elite, so they should have enough throwing opportunities. Maybe he doesn't put up the numbers he did from those first 4 games without Kupp, but I think he'll be fine. Garrett Wilson is the wide receiver 8. And the crazy thing about Wilson is his career targets have broken down like this: 164 from Zach Wilson, 50 from Joe Flacco, 41 from Mike White, 35 from Trevor Siemian, 20 from Tim Boyle, and 5 from Chris Streveler. So this, if Rodgers is able to stay healthy, even at age 41, should be the best quarterback Wilson's ever had. What's your outlook for Wilson heading into his 3rd year?
Yeah, just having said that, he's still a bit of a projection because he was 43rd in best ball points added per game last year. But that was, he had arguably the worst quarterback situations in the league. Only scored 3 touchdowns. So I have to imagine that's where Aaron Rodgers is really going to help him, is the touchdown department. Could easily score double-digit touchdowns for the first time in his career. Only has 7 touchdowns in his career for the first 2 seasons, as amazing a wide receiver he is. So he's been really held back by quarterback play. You also just have to be assuming that Rodgers is going to be the same Aaron Rodgers that we knew before this injury. And Rodgers is turning 41. I know you're projecting him to decline a little bit more than I am, but that's part of the projection as well. So I have Garrett Wilson right here, but again, you are banking on Aaron Rodgers returning to form and staying healthy, which is tough. So that there's some inherent risk that's outside of Wilson's control. But I think if Rodgers stays healthy, Wilson has a shot, to put up a top 5 type season.
Yeah, and I mean, it's still, even if Rodgers isn't anywhere near what he used to be, I mean, it's still probably better than any quarterback Wilson has had. So from that angle, there's not as much risk, and then you have Tyrod Taylor backing him up, which is not the worst. I mean, definitely an upgrade from all those other names as well. So, I think Wilson's pretty safe here. Davante Adams is the wide receiver 9. Now he's entering his age 32 season. There are some whispers about a trade that have been denied. But once Pierce took over, they did make it a point to involve Adams a little bit more. He went from 9.8 targets to 10.9, even though the team as a whole got more run heavy. So how do you kind of value Adams, as an older guy in a shaky offense, but as the clear top target?
Yeah, I still think he's one of the better receivers in the league, even at 31. But the Raiders quarterback situation is a disaster right now. With Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, it's caused Adams to be frustrated. He's a potential trade candidate. But when it came to the draft, the Raiders were sort of banking on getting Michael Penix at 13th overall, but the Falcons really derailed those plans. So they took Brock Bowers. That turn of events, both directions there really did ding Adams in my projections. Like we were saying on the tight end pod, Bowers is a generational type prospect at tight end. He's going to command targets. Jacoby Myers does command a high target share as well. So there's a lot more downside than we typically see with Davante Adams. So I have him right here at wide receiver 9, but I think there's clearly a drop off once Wilson and Nacua are off the board. I kind of have those guys in a mini tier where really the next 6 or 7 receivers you could argue going here at wide receiver 9. So I think this is a fair price for him, but I'd rather just wait and maybe have some guy fall to me, just depending on how the draft's going. But Adams has a lower floor than we've typically seen, and it's not really based on him or his talent or his age or anything. It's just the situation around him. And I don't know, like if he gets traded, maybe that helps, but any of his potential landing spots don't excite me too much. So I think right now, wide receiver 9 sounds about right.
Yeah. He's kind of in a glut of guys. I actually have a wide receiver 12, so I'm a little lower, but there's just a lot of uncertainty with him. But the floor is going to be high because he's just so good. But that quarterback situation does worry me in Vegas if he doesn't get traded. My wide receiver 10 is Marvin Harrison Jr. This is obviously a big projection. I know, especially in best ball weeks, he goes very high. I guess how early is too early for Harrison, just given that, if you're taking him number 10, even 11, 12, you're taking him over guys with established track records for the most part. When it's too early for Harrison?
I mean, wide receiver 10 sounds about right. I think when after the draft, when I did my initial projections, I had him around wide receiver 17, but I've slowly moved it up since then. So he's right around wide receiver 11 for me. He's just one of the best wide receiver prospects we've ever seen, and maybe I'm a little bit biased. His dad was one of my favorite fantasy wide receivers right when I got into fantasy. His dad was in his prime, so. He has a really good pedigree. He's a solid prospect. He has a chance to be, like a Jamarr Chase type rookie and just be a fantasy stud out of the gate. I think that's the most likely outcome here. And I think this is a pretty good situation, ending up at Arizona with Kyler Murray. I think he has a fairly high floor and the sky's the limit. So I think, wide receiver 10, while it might be a little bit of a reach, I think he's one of those guys where it's definitely worth it. You're just really banking on him hitting the ground running as a rookie. And he's so polished. He doesn't really have that many weaknesses where I could definitely see that happening. So there's absolutely some times where I'm taking him in this slot.
Yeah, definitely, especially when you're trying to put together a Kyler Cardinal stack in best ball. I love him this high. I mean, tight end 10, wide receiver 10, you're pretty much taking him close to his ceiling, given that he is a rookie. But he has that kind of upside. I guess it's just, comparing him to guys like, okay, Chris Olave's wide receiver 11. He's entering his age 24 season. He's had 1,000 yards in both of his first 2 years. What do you think of Olave this year?
Yeah, he's already established himself as, one of the better up and coming wide receivers. And he's been pretty reliable over his first 2 seasons. So he might be a little bit underrated, I think. Like, wide receiver 11 is about where I'd have him. Last year he finished 24th in best ball points added per game. The situation doesn't really look that much better this year. So I think he's one of those guys. He lacks a touchdown upside other guys have in this range. Only 4 and 5 touchdowns over his first 2 seasons. They still have Derek Carr under center. So it's hard to get too excited about him. And the unfortunate thing with him is I think he's sitting on top of, again, this is a tier of 6 or 7 wide receivers where a slight change of the projection can send them up or down, 6 or 7 slots. So this is the range where I don't like taking guys at the top of the tier, which is kind of Olave right here. I rather just kind of have guys fall for me, attack maybe running back in this range, or, just load up at receiver. So it really depends where I am in my draft or where I'm drafting from. But this sounds about right for Olave, but just given, the tiers and how they shake out, I tend to shy away just because you get some guys with comparable projections with maybe more upside a little bit later on.
And I have no problem with Olave. I mean, he's a high floor guy, which, at this early in the draft, I don't mind. And there's always a chance he improves on that touchdown number. Probably won't with Derek Carr. I'm not a big Derek Carr fan, but there's at least room to grow. And I think his floor is pretty much going to be, 1,000-yard guys. And he might even improve on that because, Carr was dumping it down to Kamara like crazy last year. So if that stops, I think that, could help Olave. I also think we'll talk about this, in an upcoming pod, but I think Shaheed is interesting in that offense as well. Wide receiver 12, Drake London, another guy who's a little bit of a projection, year 1, 72 catches for 866 and 4 scores. Last year, 69 for 905 and just 2 scores. But with Kirk Cousins here, there should be a lot more volume for this passing offense and efficiency as well. So do you like London as a top 12 wide receiver given that?
Yeah. And he's a guy I was very high on coming out of USC. I said he's like a blend of Keenan Allen and Mike Evans. I still think that. And like you said, he's really a projection still, similar to Kyle Pitts, his teammate, and Garrett Wilson even, where they've just been held back by poor quarterback play, run-heavy offense. But that should all change this year. And he's still just 23 years old, entering his year 3 season, so could easily break out. But every other thing that's been holding him back is changing for the better this year. But this is one of those things, I know we always complain about it, but ADP is annoyingly sharp with him, where, I think the market realizes he's going to break out. So it's about right having him wide receiver 12. That's where I have him. Most years, maybe they would kind of overlook this and he'd be wide receiver 17 or something like that, but they got it right here. He should absolutely be inside the top 12. And I think he's one of those guys, he has top 5 upside. If this offense is as good as I think it could be, he has double-digit touchdown upside, could be, the alpha in this offense alongside, Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. So lots to like. Everything could go his way this year, kind of the perfect storm of upside. So love him here at wide receiver 12.
Yeah, his underlying metrics tend to check out. His target per route rate is usually in the low to mid 20s. So I like him as well. Plays indoors, should be the number 1 target in the offense. Not really much to not like. And he still had 2 very good years to start his career, even with poor quarterback play. And there's room for, I think, more touchdown upside given his size, especially. He's a bigger guy, kind of like a Mike Evans type, as you mentioned. So I have no problem with him as a top 12. I think, after you get past that that top 5, with Lamb and Hill and Chase and Jefferson and Amon Ra. There's a little more wiggle room. I think, could make a case for some guys, but overall, I think there's nobody really sticks out as like a guy I'm fading in this range. I'm a little lower on Davante just because there's some uncertainty, and I think Harrison's a little riskier because of the lack of a track record. But nothing egregious here. I think it just depends on your type of draft. If you're in best ball, I think Harrison makes a lot of sense. I think if you're in a redraft league, maybe you're going for guys like Olave a little bit more, Garrett Wilson, because I think their floors are pretty locked in regardless. So no real qualms here. Anything else stand out with this tier?
No, I think I think a guy like Mike Evans, I have a little bit higher. We'll talk about him on the next pod, but I think that you could argue Mike Evans is still, a top 12 type of receiver, especially in best ball. So I think he's offering some sneaky upside just based on where he's going. So he's one guy that I think missed the cut that I think should probably deserve some honorable mention in this tier.
Yeah. I guess that comes down to how much Baker can continue doing it without Canales, his quarterback whisperer in Tampa. But yeah, we'll have another couple pods breaking down the other wide receivers, going to wide receiver 2 and 3 and beyond tiers. We already have our quarterback, running back, and tight end episodes up, so be sure to check those out. And 2 more, as I mentioned, wide receiver episodes coming next week, so be sure to subscribe to the Fantasy Flex wherever you get your pods so you do not miss any episodes. Also, remember fantasylabs.com for all of our fantasy football rankings and content. You can find Sean on X at @_oddsmaker. I'm at Chris Raybon. We're at those same handles on the free, award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this money.